November, the month where skeletons, ghouls, and various monsters leave town for 11 months, leaving us with leftover mini-sized candy bars to build up our strength for their return next year. November, a seasonally beautiful time here in Minnesota when reading moves indoors, when the colorful leaves give way to the pending, nay, inevitable snowpocalypse. November, the month where darkness comes upon the land daily at 4 p.m., bringing with it the long night. November's birthstone is topaz, which was believed by the ancient Greeks to give strength, and by Europeans from the 1300s to the 1600s to dispel anger and thwart magic spells. November, a month where men of all ages grow mustaches to bring awareness to important health issues while displaying the glory of their fabulous facial follicles. So what did I, your humble booktuber, read and receive in the month of November? We may never know the answers to these questions. Oh wait, yes we do. That's the topic of this video, and I think it's time to get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to BellTube. I'm Brian Bell. Today we're going to talk about everything that happened here on the channel in the month of November. We're going to kind of combine a lot of videos into this one. We're going to talk about the books that I received. We're going to talk about the books you guys voted in. We're going to talk about the books that I read, of course, and I've got a one for the road today that I think you're going to find real value in coming up towards the end of the episode. So let's get right into it and let's talk about the books that I received in the month of November. Now, this first book I actually got a little bit earlier than November, but because I'm a space case sometimes, I forgot to put it in the October video. This book is called A Journey Thrice Begun by author Sean Bobby Kerr. Now, Sean Bobby Kerr is also a patron of the channel, and he asked if I would read the first chapter of this book, and I did, and it's good, and I can't fully recommend it yet until I read the entire book, but I have to say, the first chapter, Sean Bobby Kerr, you did an excellent job with it. Stay tuned for more information on this book as we get into the new year because I am going to read this in the next 90 days. Thank you so much for sending me in this book. The next book that I received in the month of November is by author Dennis M. Myers, and this is called Rise of the Automated Empire, I believe is the name of the series, and this particular book is called Precipice. I don't know much about this yet. I believe John over at Talking Story is going to be reading this coming up pretty quick, or at least book one in this series. I just wanted to say thank you to Dennis for sending me your book. I will leave a link in the description if you guys want to find out more. This next book I picked up myself. This is for our Quiluminati read coming up in December with, of course, Mike, John, and Dr. Philip Chase. This is Bernard Cornwell's The Last Kingdom. Now, I am going in entirely blind to this. I think Philip might have read this like 30 years ago, and John and Mike saw the TV show. I have no idea what this is about, other than there's something about Uhtred, son of Uhtred. I don't know what that is. I'm going to be finding out the first week in December, but yes, I did haul this book in November. The next book I picked up was Long Price Quartet number 2 by Daniel Abraham. This is A Betrayal in Winter, and I did read this book in November, and we're going to get to it when I go through the books that I read in the month. But yeah, that was hauled in November as well. Now, this book is truly amazing. If you're a patron of the channel, you probably saw my unboxing, but this is The Stone of Farewell, done by The Broken Binding, of course by Tad Williams. This is book 2 in the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series, which I have yet to read, but with these beautiful books, come on, it's only a matter of time. This series is going to get knocked out sometime in 2025. I can't wait for it, especially when I'm looking at these kind of just real premier edition books that The Broken Binding has been, putting out. I'm not going to go through all of the insides and the outsides of this book because you've probably seen them on other unboxings, but yeah, I did pick this up in November. And the last book that I picked up in November was one that you guys, the BellTube community, selected for me, and this is M.L. Wong's The Sword of Kaigen. I also read this book in November. We're going to talk about that along with everything else that I read here in a minute, but I would just like to say thank thank you to the BellTube community for recommending that book. Actually, it won a poll because we do that here on the channel every single month. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button. Also hit the like button because it does help the channel. It helps get the word out about the channel a little bit. But I have to say, it's so fun seeing what you guys pick for me to read because you guys in the free community poll that we do every single month selected The Sword of Kaigen. Did I like your pick? Did I not like your pick? Was I sort of mixed? We're going to find out here as the video goes along. So thanks for voting it in. Thanks for liking the video and subscribing. If this seems like a channel that kind of has a vibe you can get accustomed to. I also want to say a quick thank you to the patrons of this channel. And now we actually have channel memberships right along here in YouTube. You can click that by hitting the join button. Why would you want to be a member? You get some kind of behind the scenes stuff. We've got a real intimate community. It's a lot of fun and it's literally less than $2 a month. It's a great way to support the channel if you have the means. Let's move on to what I read. All right, the first book that I finished in November. Now, I had started this in October and I held it up at the last October recap is Shadow of the Gods, Book 1 in the Bloodsworn Saga by John Gwynne. I finished this book, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 days into the month of November. What did I think? I think this is an awesome series. I really enjoyed all 3 POVs in this book a ton. Now, am I going to read Hunger of the Gods next? Yeah, it's next in this trilogy, but I'm not so sure I'm going to be able to get to it much before January because December's TBR is quite stacked. My only issue with this book has absolutely nothing to do with this book, and that is a problem that I'm going to remedy moving forwards. You see, I read book 4 in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is House of Chains, directly before I read Shadow of the Gods, and it was not a fair kind of lens to be reading it through because Malazan for me has become one of my all-time favorite series, and I have found that reading a Malazan book followed up by another kind of epic fantasy book might not be great for the second book because I'm still thinking a lot about Malazan. So what I'm going to do moving forward is every Malazan book will be followed up by science fiction or lit RPG so as to not run into what I ran into with Shadow of the Gods. I think you get my meaning here. Let's move on to the next book. All right, so we did get into some sci-fi in November, and that is with Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert. Okay, so it's a bit surprising it's taken me this long to actually read Dune Messiah. I didn't know what it was about. If you've watched this channel and all, you know I kind of go into these books blind. Obviously, I know the main premise because Dune is one of my favorite sci-fi books of all time. If not my favorite, it's debatable. It's 1, 2, or 3 for sure. But what did I think about Dune Messiah? I'm a little mixed on it, to be honest with you. I didn't like it as much as I was hoping that I would. I think the reason is because I went in with expectations, and I really should have known better when you're dealing with an author like a Frank Herbert who has a lot of ideas to share. And I felt that this book would have the general sensibilities of the first book, Dune. And I, of course, just watched, Dune 1 and Dune 2, the movies that came out in the theater. And I was expecting Dune Messiah to sort of go along in that vein. But I noticed that tonally, this book is really different. We start off, and I'm not going to spoil anything because I know people who watch this channel also many times like to go into your books as blind and unaware as possible of the premise, but just suffice it to say that this book starts 12 years after the events of the first book, Dune, and we are dealing with the ramifications of everything Paul Atreides has done since then. There's a lot of people that are loving what he did, and there are some very close people in his inner sphere that are absolutely detesting what he's done as emperor. And so that's really what this book is about, and it explores some kind of metaphysical ideas that I'm fine with. There's no problem there, but just the entire scope of this story was really different than the original book. I'm not exactly sure the best way to explain this because I don't want to ruin anything. Do I recommend you read Dune Messiah? Yeah, if you're a Dune fan, you really should read this book. To me, this book absolutely feels like a middle book. So I will be continuing along the Dune journey, at least as far as all the Frank Herbert books go. But this did feel really kind of like a middle book. Like there was, events happening, but the conclusion for me was not entirely satisfying, and I think that's probably by design. So I'll have to pick up the next entry of Dune whenever time allows. Maybe we'll do it right after the next Malazan book. Let's move on to the next one. All right, the next book that I read was one voted in by you guys, the BellTube community, and that is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong. Okay, a couple of thoughts on this book for you. For one, it was way longer than I thought it was going to be. I read this on ebook on my Kindle, and for whatever reason, I thought this standalone book was about 400 and some pages. Turns out it's much closer to 600, 650 pages, so it took me a little bit longer to get through. For me, this book was really almost two books. And I think if you find people who have read this book before, they'll most likely agree. The first half of the book is one thing. The second half of the book is another thing, even though we're still following the same family and basically, the same characters, the same village, the same world. I didn't know what the Sword of Kaigen was, obviously, like every other reader, until I picked up the book and started reading it. But suffice it to say, it's not Excalibur. Anyway, so I liked this book enough in the first half of the book, considerably more so than the second half of the book. The second half of the book explored a lot of world building that, in my opinion, was very left unfinished. It explored some chapters and some personality developments that I felt really kind of fell short for the amount of pages that we have. In other words, one character in particular has a lot of life issues resolved in a very short amount of pages. And it seemed a little bit unrealistic to me that a character could go their entire lives being one way and then all of a sudden waking up and completely changing. I just didn't buy it as much. And I think the thing that frustrates me the most about the Sword of Kaigen is that it just doesn't leave us in a spot where we go, okay, that was a great standalone. It leaves us in a spot where we go, all right, that was a good book, but I need to see what happens in book 2. And unfortunately, the author has determined that the way that she built this world out is not conducive to any more books in this universe. So for now, this is it when it comes to the universe that she built out for the Sword of Kaigen. And for me, it's not enough. I don't really understand why this has been the booktube darling that it is. I thought it was a good book. Do I think it is a book that has, really merited all the raves that it's gotten over the last couple of years on booktube? Not particularly, at least not for me. Your mileage, as always, may and very likely will vary. But I thought the Sword of Kaigen, if I was going to give this stars, maybe 3 stars, maybe 3.5 stars. You guys, I'm notoriously stingy about 5 stars. It just doesn't happen very much at all. I'm not even giving this 4 stars because I didn't walk away going, God, that was really a great book. I walked away saying there was some really great elements to this book, but not enough for me to go, wow, what a home run for a standalone. The way that I anticipated it was going to be, because I've heard so much about this book over the last few years. Had this book not been a booktube darling, I might have been looking at this book a little bit differently. I might have said, you know what, for what it is, it's really, really good. But I just don't really get the hype. I think that's what you need to know about the Sword of Kaigen, at least from my eyes and from my mind. Let's move on to the next book. The next book is The Long Price Quartet Book 2 by Daniel Abraham, A Betrayal in Winter. All right. Now, I have to tell you guys, I am blown away. We were just talking about booktube darlings. I do not understand why The Long Price Quartet is not a booktube darling. Yes, it's discussed in certain corners of, booktube. Yes, Alan from the Library of Alexandria and Tori from Tori Talks have been screaming about this series as long as I've been watching booktube, but just incredible stuff here. The world building is phenomenal. The culture is phenomenal. This book obviously is book 2, and we're following a couple of the same characters that we got in book 1, but we are getting plenty of new characters. We're in a new city altogether. We have a new poet altogether. And like I mentioned in my review of book 1, poets are really the word that's used for those who control the magic. Now, if you are looking for an incredible dramatic read, look no further than Long Price Quartet. If you are looking for a ton of magic, this is not going to be for you. This is about 99% not magic, 1% magic. The magic literally happens. If we're talking about a book that's about 320 some odd pages, the magic would probably combine into maybe 2 pages, if that. It's not a magical type of story, but it's enough that it is still in fantasy because the amount that these poets wield when it comes to magic is basically continent devastating. If they so choose, they could completely destroy any enemy, continents, kingdoms, what have you, if they want. So we know they have this up their sleeve if they really need to, but most of this book is really about interpersonal relationships. It's about the culture, and in particular, this book discusses succession, how basically the leader of a nation is succeeded by their children and what has to happen for any particular child of them to succeed into their role as ruler. This is really good stuff. And when I say good stuff, not only do I mean excellent prose, I mean excellent ideas. I've read so many books, but I've never read anything so far like Long Price Quartet. It's just in every way really different, and I encourage you highly, if you think your book tastes align with mine, do yourself a favor, get book 1 of the Long Price Quartet and read it. Then do book 2 like I just did, and I bet you when you're right there at that halfway point, you'll want to continue. I think books 1 and books 2 go together really well. I'm going to assume 3 and 4 do as well into one completed story. And I love this because it's a 300-page ordeal, right? We're not talking about a 1,500-page tome that I've got coming up in December, which I discussed in my December TBR video, which I will throw right up here. But Long Price Quartet, big recommend for me. Let's move on to the next book. The next book that I read is in LitRPG, and this is He Who Fights with Monsters, number 11 by Travis Deverall, aka Shirt-a-Loon. All right, so if I'm in book 11 of a series, obviously I like the series, right? You don't go to book 11 if you don't like it. Here's the challenge with LitRPG, you guys. And you know that I'm a champion. If you've watched this channel at all, I'm a huge advocate and spokesperson and champion of LitRPG. One of my favorite ones I read recently is right back there called Meet Your Maker by Jonathan McLean and Seth McDuffie. But He Who Fights with Monsters, number 11, while it is a really good series, this particular entry was really just okay. And I think that because I love this series so much, I'm giving it maybe even a little bit more credit than I would if it was just a mid-series for me. It's going to happen, right? I mean, if you're going to have 11 books come out, and these are not short books, they're pretty big ones, you're going to have some, I'm not going to call it a clunker, but let's just say when it comes to LitRPG, Travis Deverall, the author, does a ton of info dumping about every few books. And there's a reason for it. It's how the setting is really set up. And how the setting is set up? Yeah, somehow that'll make sense to anybody. I don't know. I'm talking a lot. Anyway, all you need to know about this is that it's a great series. I do recommend it, but some of the problems that I've had in earlier entries with He Who Fights with Monsters manifest back into this book because we are dealing in something called transition zones. It's going to mean nothing to you if you've not read this book yet or read the series yet, but if you are like maybe on books 4, 5, 6, 7, somewhere middle of the road in He Who Fights with Monsters, book 11 brings us back to these kinds of concepts of transition zones and monster zones and all of those things and claiming territories and Jason trying to figure out more about how he's basically turning from a human being from Earth into a great astral being. Now, this is very cool progression fantasy, but it is a lot of info dumping and it is a huge book. So will I be continuing the next book? Definitely. I don't go through 11 huge books and not want to find out how the story ends. I'm not even so sure the story is going to end in the next book, but I liked it. It was probably my least favorite book of the month just because of the format and the style of what the author did for this particular entry. Let's move on to the book of the month. So here we are. It's time to pick a book of the month. And of course, if you've been watching this for the last 10 minutes, you already know my book of the month, a clear and runaway winner. A Betrayal in Winter. Long Price Quartet #2 by Daniel Abraham. For all the reasons that I said earlier, this is a clear winner of Book of the Month. Long Price Quartet may wind up in my favorite series of all time. It's too soon to say. I'm going to be doing my updated Best of Fantasy, series either in December, coming up next month, or in January. It just depends if I get to books 3 and 4 before I do that video or not, because I really want to have that series completed before I decide if it's going to be in that list or not. Mostly because it's already out, right? So to give you an example, A Song of Ice and Fire is on my list. It's very high up on the list, even though it's not complete, because it's not complete. I've read as far as I can read. I haven't read as far as I can read so far with Long Price Quartet, but you best believe I will be doing so. Book of the Month. A Betrayal in Winter. I just screamed into the microphone. Hope I didn't deafen you. Now let's move on to the next. I'm being told we have a special guest. Yes, folks, I forget that when we have our recaps in November and every other month, we do have a special guest that likes to come in and explain what he read or maybe didn't read or looked at the cover, maybe read the back blurb, maybe read the dedication. We're never exactly sure. Without further ado, your favorite 80s synth pop icon, Rick Thunder. That's right, everybody. It's me, Rick Thunder. I'm back, and that's a fact. Okay, this month, I've read a book. Now, we've talked about this before. We made a mistake when we tried that Joe Abercrombie book called Red Country. But now, I gotta show you something I'm so excited about. Pierce Brown's Red Rising, right? So it's me, Rick Thunder, always in my red, looking at a book. Look at that. The red cap just fell off. It's a sign. Okay, so Red Rising. Oh, I got to point it here too. Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So what was this book about? Okay, I actually read this one, you guys. It's really exciting. Okay, so, by the way, there's Pierce Brown. They were going to put a picture of Rick Thunder. That's a fact because they ran out of room. Okay, anyway, Red Rising. So it's a bunch of people and they get together and they have to rise up, right? Because the red people, they're living under Mars. Now, I've not toured on Mars. I was offered to tour on Mars a long, long time ago in the 80s because, as you know, I am a synth pop icon, Rick Thunder. That's fact. Okay, so I was offered to go to Mars, but I wasn't able to go because I was in the hot tub due to a series of unrelated hot tub accidents. Yeah, anyway, so Red Rising, these people, they rise up to the top, right? Because at first they're the workers, but then they're in spaceships, and then they're fighting each other, and then they go down to this planet again, and it's almost like, that one game, I can't remember the name of the game, I know it was really hungry, but anyway, so these people are fighting each other, right? And I'm like, okay, who's gonna win? It's gotta be that Darrow guy, right? Because he's sort of the guy of Red Rising. Like if Rick Thunder was there, I'd be like, the Red Rising people. Here's the thing. I really did like this book, but you know what it did not have? When they were on the place where they were doing all the games, they didn't have a battle of the bands. How do you not have a battle of the bands? You gotta have a battle of the bands, especially when I'm on your team, Rick Thunder. And that's a fact. Well, thank you, Rick, for your monthly installment of Rick's Picks. I don't really know what to say to that. It happens to be one of my favorite series, but I'm glad that you loved it in the way that you did. Let's move on. So what did we get up to on the channel for Whom the Bell Tolls episodes in the month of November? We had 2. It was basically International's Ladies' Night, or daytime, so to speak, here in the US, as we featured Derry from the channel Derry's Read It Before, all the way from New Zealand, and we also featured Sylvia all the way from Bulgaria, featuring her channel Library Unbounded. If you've not seen those episodes, go into the BellTube catalog. Yes, we are on season 2 right now, but you'll find some incredible conversations in those live streams under the For Whom the Bell Tolls tab under the lives. Both of those ladies were fantastic. I really appreciated getting to know them better. And yes, they will be returning to the channel. We also did a 1-year anniversary special, which basically was so much fun. We had a lot of my favorite friends in the BookTube community join me on screen. I think at one point there were 9 or 10 of us. It was a blast. I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody who was able to join on screen. For those of you that were not able to join on screen, I thank you for at least being able to let me know in advance that you had other commitments. You guys are just amazing. It really is the best part of BookTube for me, are these friendships that I've discovered. And I did kind of a good, a bad, and the ugly video last week talking about my experience in my first year of BookTube, which really didn't talk about any books at all. It talked about a couple of genres, but it talked mostly about the things I love about BookTube, the things that I'm kind of so-so on, and honestly, there's a few things in there that I just don't care for, and I was very, very honest about it. If you've not seen it yet, it'll probably show up at the end of this video and the, things that you might like to see at the end screen. But it was one of the longer videos I've ever done. It's like 45 minutes long. But if you really want to get to know me as a booktuber, I think that video might do exactly what you're looking for. It's not a video that is intended for new people. It's a video for people who are already established viewers of this community, so you kind of know me already when I go into some of those details. Check it out. I think you'll like it. We also did a video called Weird Books, and I highlighted a bunch of books that are weird in a number of different ways. They might be structurally weird, they might have weird characters, they might be thematically weird, they're just weird in general. That video, again, is available in the BellTube catalog. Go take a look at it. So far, so good. A lot of people have really found something they want to give a try to in that weird book curated list. Let's move on. And we're moving on to a one for the road today. And I think before we get into the one for the road today, I got to show you guys a couple of things. For one, I don't know if this will show up on camera. We've got new One for the Road merch. This is the One for the Road coffee mug. This comes in 2 sizes. Now, I'm not going to make this a whole merchandise pitch, but if you like baseball jerseys, we've got the One for the Road baseball jersey. There's One for the Road t-shirts. We got One for the Road everything here. But let's do an actual One for the Road. And today is going to be about forgiveness. And in particular, forgiveness to ourselves. We are taught, forgive and forget. And we are pretty good sometimes about doing that to other people, and where we fall down, especially myself. And I tell you guys all the time, a big reason why I do these One for the Roads is not just for you guys, but it's also for myself. It's kind of a constant reminder. And now that I've got a coffee mug to remind me every morning, you like that little merch push in there? I thought that was well done. I'm going to talk about forgiveness just for a minute here, and then we're going to wrap up the episode. I think forgiveness towards ourselves is hugely underrated. It's not done enough, and it's something that we need to bring ourselves a little bit of attention to. I think that a lot of us, even though some of us may say, I have no regrets, I've lived my life, blah, 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 I don't buy it. I'm of an age where if you've lived as long as I have, or maybe even longer, you would have a very uninteresting life if you've done nothing that you regret doing. And I think that to some degree, we are much better at forgiving other people for their failings than we are at forgiving ourselves for our own personal failings. And my challenge to all of us today is think about something that you've punished yourself enough for already. I don't care if it happened last week. I don't care if it's a character issue within you. I don't care if it's a specific event from a long time ago. Whatever it is, I want you to ask yourself, how long am I willing to punish myself for whatever it is that I'm feeling that I let myself down on? And do you really deserve a 10-year sentence in the penalty box, right? Should you jail yourself for a life sentence over a mistake that you made that chances are you might have made the best decision you could with the information that you had at the time that you made it? I think we blame ourselves a lot more than we blame other people. And while I'm not a big thrower of blame here and there, I do want to recognize within myself, and hopefully you guys can do this too, that sometimes it's okay to say, you know what, I forgive myself for fill in the blank. And I'm not willing to continue to punish myself day after day, month after month, year after year, sometimes decade after decade, for something that anybody else would have forgiven us for in about 10 minutes. So I hope that's a valuable one for the road today. I would like to know in the comments below a couple of things. One, what did you read in November? Did anything just kind of knock your socks off, right? Or as my friend John says, did anything blow your hair back? I don't know. I don't have enough left to fully get that blown hair back effect that John gets, but did something knock your socks off, right? Did you read something that maybe your expectations weren't met? Let me know that too. And I also want to know in the comments, what do you got coming up in December? Because we are doing so much here in December. Every top 10 list that you can imagine is going to happen in the month of December. We're going to be doing the top 10 fantasy series list. We're going to be doing the top 10 books of the year. We're going to be doing my top 10 surprising books of the year. We're going to be doing my top 10 most disappointing books of the year. Not worst, just disappointing. So we've got lots coming up in December, and I'd like to know what you've got coming up. Until then, everybody stay positive, and of course, here's your fortune.